Hello and welcome to Friday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic, and we are in request mode today. Lots of reasons for that. Firstly, Mark is going to be trying a really beautiful Sudoku puzzle by the constructor Shy later on. That puzzle has a 100% rating on Logic Masters Germany. It was created on our Discord channel. And it's been both recommended to us and requested, so definitely check that puzzle out. Now, on the other hand, I am going to be trying a logic puzzle today, and this is by Freddie Hand, the young puzzler from the UK, one of the up-and-coming stars of the world puzzle scene. As I've mentioned in previous videos, Freddie is ridiculously clever, and I've enjoyed all his puzzles before, and this is a Litz puzzle from about April 2020, I believe, and this has been requested again, so that's why we're going to have a go at it. Now, the other request we've had recently, or requests I should say we've had recently, are to have a look at this latest Fistemafel Star Battle, a 12 by 12 Star Battle puzzle, which he's recently released. Now, I've actually just recorded my solve of that puzzle, and I'm going to put that up for you guys who are patrons of the channel over on our Patreon channel later tonight. So it is a very interesting puzzle. It's got sort of two distinct ways of solving it. You can solve it using normal Star Battle techniques, which is the way I did it originally, and it's a very beautiful solve, but not too complicated. And then there is the way Fistemafel intended the puzzle to be solved, which is absolutely incredible, and uses sort of a transformation of the original puzzle into a different puzzle altogether. And I've also sort of talked about that at the end of that video, and that is really, really, it's something new to me, so I guess you guys might enjoy it too. Now, what are the rules of this puzzle, Litz? Now, we've covered, I think, one Litz puzzle on the channel before, but it was absolutely ages ago, and I won't blame you if you've forgotten the rules. But this is an absolutely staple puzzle of the sort of world puzzle scene. It's very common, a very common type, and it has some rather beautiful logic often, and I'm sure in a Freddy puzzle that's what we're going to find. So let me read you the rules. What we've got to do is shade exactly 4 connected cells in each outlined region to form an L, I, T or S tetromino. Now, we have to do that subject to certain conditions, but before we get into what those conditions are, I just want to make sure everyone knows what an L tetromino looks like. It looks like that, i.e. it looks like an L. Now, it can be reflected or rotated, but basically all of these are L's. What's an I tetromino? Well, that's very straightforward. That's just 4 connected cells like that. What's a T tetromino? Well, you won't be surprised to know it's that and the reflections and rotations thereof. And what's an S pentomino? It's that. So I'm sure you're all familiar with these shapes if you've ever played Tetris, but an S, again, obviously we can rotate and reflect, etc. But that's basically the 4 basic shapes that are used in the Litz puzzle. Now we've got to connect, so we've got to basically put exactly one of those shapes in each of these regions, subject to the following conditions. All the shaded cells need to be connected with each other. Okay, so wherever we put these shapes, we have to connect them all together. But we must do that so that no 2 by 2 region of the grid contains shaded cells. So if we did it in such a way that, for example, those cells all ended up being shaded, that would be incorrect. That is not allowed. Now, the final condition is that when 2 tetrominoes are when 2 tetrominoes in adjacent regions share an edge, they cannot be of the same shape, and that's regardless of rotations and reflections. So let us imagine that we put an L tetromino in there like that, and we figured out that we thought that the tetromino in this region was that one. That is wrong, okay, because this is an L tetromino, this is an L tetromino, and they share an edge. You're not allowed to do that. So similarly, that would also be not allowed. Okay, so we've got to keep the same brand of tetromino apart from one another. in trying to connect all of these up. Now, I love Litz puzzles, so I'm very much looking forward to trying this. Do have a go at it. I know it's not Sudoku, but as I so often say on this channel, there are so many beautiful logic problems out there that aren't Sudoku, and wouldn't it be wonderful if we could... I think if we can widen the audience for puzzles like this, it would be fantastic. So the way to play is to click the link under the video. I'm going to be using our software. I'm going to be using colours today. And yeah, with that, let's get cracking. So the most obvious places I can see to start in this puzzle are going to be this shape here. Now, what sort of tetromino can we put into a straight line? Well, it's going to have to be an I tetromino. And you can see it's going to have to use those 3 squares and then one of the others, but we don't know which one. Similarly, this region here, that's going to have to be an I tetromino as well. So we're going to have to be careful not to connect these, because we can't connect 2 I tetrominoes together. Those 2 are going to have to be grey. Now, we can now think, in fact, one thing I wanted to mention as I was putting this into the software, look what Freddie's built into this puzzle. Rather gorgeous, isn't it? Look, 2, 3, 5 and 7. So this is a very naturally occurring version of the Litz puzzle. Now, but let's think about whether this square could be part of a tetromino. Well, obviously if it was, it would have to be part of an I tetromino, and you can see why that's a problem. Look, if we put that in, we now have a 2 by 2 grey area, which we mustn't have. So that allows us to do a little bit of logic down there. That can't be grey, that can't be grey, and that can't be grey. And now all of a sudden the 7 shape has become very restricted, because I need to put a tetromino in here, and there are only 5 cells to use. So we can see those cells simply are going to have to be in the shape. And a further deduction is that whichever one of these other cells is included, it will be part of an L tetromino. So that means, you know, we couldn't make this, we couldn't, but you could, yeah, I mean, there's a few things that means, but let's look at this weird shape here and think about this cell. Can that cell be in? No, because that's going to create 2 by 2 regions. Ditto this square. And actually, this square is also impossible, I think. Oh no, maybe not. Maybe that could be an S. No. Oh right, my bad. That could be an S and not break the puzzle. I was noticing that if it was a T tetromino, it would create a 2 by 2 region. And if it went like that, that would be an L tetromino, which would connect to an L tetromino. Not allowed. But an S tetromino would work. Okay, so that's obviously not where we're meant to look next. Right. Okay, well here's something a little bit interesting about the 3 shape. Look, can this square ever be in the tetromino we draw in the 3 shape? Let's look at that. Let's shade it in and have a think. And the answer is no, because if I put this square as grey, one of these 2 squares at least will also have to be grey, because I can only put 2 more up there, and that will create a 2 by 2 region. So this square is green. Therefore, those 2 squares are sort of disconnected from the rest of the 3 shape. They must be green. Okay, so the 3 shape has been reduced to an L tetromino, either there or there. Now, is there a way we can... Yeah, the top one doesn't work. Let's have a look at the top version of that. So if we were to draw the tetromino in here, the place we're going to find a problem is in this little shape. Because what on earth are we going to draw into this shape? It must not be an L tetromino. You can see that wherever, in fact this square is always grey in this shape, because we can never avoid it being part of a tetromino however we draw the tetromino. But we must not do 2 things here. We must not put an L tetromino in here, because it will... There's no way of drawing an L tetromino such that it doesn't touch this L tetromino. And we must not connect a 2 by 2 region. So what are the other options for this shape? Well, we could try a T tetromino. I can see that would be possible, but that would create a 2 by 2 region. Or our old friend, the S tetromino. Put my teeth back in. And that also is going to be a problem because of a 2x2. Now I don't think anything else can be drawn there. Ergo, we can remove that as impossible, draw this in as possible, replace that grey cell which is always in this shape, avoid a 2x2 here by labelling that cell as green, avoid a 2x2 by labelling that cell as green, which makes that the shape of the I tetromino. All of those turn green in the 3. And we reach a new position. Okay, so we're going to have to think about this now. Ah, now it's interesting. Now this shape becomes interesting again. Because now this square is grey, I can't put an S tetromino in there anymore because that will create a 2x2 region there. So this square, I don't think this square can ever be in now. I think it's absolutely impossible. It was nearly impossible before, but now it is completely impossible. This square is green. This square is also troublesome, isn't it? How do we... If this square was grey, let me just look at this for a second. If this is grey, I mustn't create a 2x2, so an S is impossible. And a T is impossible. And I mustn't create an L, and that's the only other shape that can fit because an I won't. This is green. Not actually sure that's very helpful though, because this shape is a little bit open-ended, isn't it? Oh, this shape is interesting. That's just a sort of S shape, but it's not very long. So the two central squares in this S shape have to be grey. Oh, now actually there's something more we can say about the S shape. The S shape has to be an L. It has to be an L pentomino, tetromino. An L tetromino. Right. Now this is now okay. I think I've now spotted something very important. Let's look at this too. What shape of tetromino is possible in that 2 shape? This is a gorgeous idea. I mean, this is the sort of thing that I imagine somebody like Freddie spots and just thinks, I have to work this into a puzzle, because this 2 shape can only include, however we draw the 4 connected cells in this 2 shape, it has to be an L tetromino. Now, if this also has to be an L tetromino, this square cannot be in, because if it is, we're going to connect 2 L tetrominoes, so this is not in. Right. Oh, right, okay. Now this is getting even more interesting now. Because this 2 now is sort of, it's been divided up into 2 halves. We've got a top bit and a bottom bit. Now the top bit, you can see, is an L tetromino. So if we were to try and put that in the puzzle, how do we connect this to the rest of the puzzle? That's the challenge we would be faced with. And we can't. It's impossible. If we try and connect it to this shape, that would be an L tetromino. If we try and connect it to this shape, we've already looked at that. That's impossible because this is going to be an L tetromino. So the only option would be to connect it down this side somehow using this shape. Now, in order to actually, because this 2 comes down the grid so far, we just can't do it. Because even with an I tetromino here, this I is now also isolated along, we'd have this shape, but this shape cannot connect to any other part of the grid, so it doesn't work. So this top bit here must all turn green, and this 2 shape now has become far more constrained. This must be part of it because this is a 6 cell line the middle two cells are going to have to be in. So this square can't be in this funny region. I don't know what we call that region, but if that's in, it's an I tetromino, and those 4 cells are a 2 by 2 region. Ditto this square. Ditto this square. Oh. Okay. So now something very interesting has happened to this region, because we know that the only way this region escapes from the top left-hand corner of the grid, the only shape it can touch is the 2. And the 2 is an L pentomino. So this must not be an L pentomino. And the only 2 options it's got are a T pentomino. That doesn't work because the only square you can connect to orthogonally is that one, which creates a 2 by 2 region, or an I pentomino, which is what it must be, unless I've made a mistake, which is possible. So that I think this goes like that, and is completely forced. And now we know, this is gorgeous. So now this, we can't connect these two, this shape to this shape, because we know they're the same tetromino. So those 2 squares are out, those 2 squares are in. This shape at the top now, well, that's out because it would create a 2 by 2. But there are all sorts of things we can now think about with this region, because this region must not be an L tetromino. So none of this is possible. Well, those 2 squares are impossible anyway, because they'll create 2 by 2 regions. This square must be in. And so you can see that if this square is in, we create an L tetromino, so it's not in, and we create a T tetromino. And that might work. Well, it does work. This square can't be in, otherwise we'll create 2 by 2s. This square can't be in, or we'll create 2 by 2s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This square must be in. It's just, I love these sorts of puzzles. These are so carefully designed and put together. It really is a pleasure to solve things like this. Now, I tell you what now, this square can't be in, can it? I'm just thinking, because if this square is in, what sort of tetromino do we create here that doesn't give us a problem? Because if we make that in, we now cannot make this square an L tetromino. But if it's a T tetromino, it has to do that, and that's a 2 by 2 region. If it's an S tetromino, it has to do that, and that's still a 2 by 2 region. That's green. So this square is now grey, because we've got to fit 4 squares in here. So the other thing we've got to do, there's 2 things I've just realised. This funny sort of sideways T shape has to get down to the rest of the grid somehow. So one of these 2 squares at least must be grey. The other thing I've realised is that this region is still isolated. So this square must be grey, which means this square must be grey, and this can't be an L tetromino, so it must be a T. The logic feels right, so all of those turn green. That must be green, that must be green. And now I've got even more of a restriction on this funny shape up here. I mean, I might be possible, look. If it's not I, what is it? T would be impossible, that would create a 2 by 2 region. S is impossible, that creates a 2 by 2 region. L is impossible because it would have to No, L is impossible because the only L that you can draw that connects to the top of the grid is that L, and that touches that tetromino. So this is an I tetromino. I do not think there is another option. And that, well, it's a little bit helpful, but not massively. Okay, so it looks to me now like we have to look at the bottom left of the grid. That square's got to be in. I could have looked at this straight at the start. Look, that square simply has to be part of a tetromino. And we've got a 5 region. It's the same as the 2. It's just a reflection of the 2. Of course it is. So if it's a reflection of the 2, the logic is the same. This 5 can only contain an L pentomino. And look, so what are the options for this shape? It's just beautiful logic. We can't put a T in, because a T can only connect to the rest of the grid either through this cell or this cell, both of which could create a 2x2 region. So T is not possible down here. L is not possible because the 5 has an L, so the only thing that is possible is an I, because an S, you can't draw an S tetromino in that shape. So they turn green. We've got to make sure that this I connects to the rest of the grid. Now it can't connect up here to the rest of the grid, so it's going to have to connect to the rest of the grid through one of these 3 squares without creating a 2x2. So this is impossible. All of this is impossible. It's either going to come up like that or like that. One of those is forced. That turns grey. Wow, okay. I've just noticed there's a uniqueness point here, actually, look. Yeah, I'm not going to use it to solve it. I don't like using it for uniqueness, but if you were speed solving, let's ask the question whether this square could be grey. And the reason it can't be grey is that now it's impossible to tell how this I pentomino would be arranged, because it could be like that or it could be like that, and both of those work. And the only thing that's going to disambiguate that, look, is that if this square is grey, you can't create the 2x2 and it'll force that grey downwards. So I think we're going to find that the rest of the logic forces this square to be grey, but I won't assume that because I don't want to use uniqueness to solve the puzzle. It's just a little interesting point. Okay, so what have we got now? We've got, well, whichever one of these is grey, that can never be grey, or it'll create a 2x2, so that's not in. There's a little point I can see here, which is that in this shape we have to connect the top part of the grid here. This is not a connection point, so it's going to be either this cell or this cell that operate as the connecting point for this region with the bottom left of the grid. So if, for example, we were to look at this region and try and start tetrominoes down here, obviously we're never going to be able to connect either of these squares to the rest of the grid. So this must be green, this must be green. If this was in, if that was in, that wouldn't be good enough, so that's also green. If that was in, that's quite interesting actually, that's also impossible. This square is impossible, because if this square is in, that's the only tetromino you can draw. That's an L tetromino, and it can't connect to this square, which is the only one it can reach. So this actually gives us another green cell, and we're starting to build a restriction that matters. So we've now got a run of 6, so the central 2 must be turned grey. Now this square's not in, because that will create a 2x2 in that region. We've got all sorts of things going on now. So this is an I pentomino, that's fine to connect to. And if this is now grey, let's think about what shape we can draw as our tetromino in this region. We now can't, if this was grey, we can't now make this tetromino an L. So it has to be an S. That's the only shape we can draw, and in drawing an S, we'll create a 2x2 region. So that tells us this square is, as we suspected, green. That's grey. The grey comes down here. That turns green. And we now must connect exactly through that point. That turns grey. This square's green. And we now have the option here of either an L or an S. Right, let's look at an S. Let's look at an S just for a moment. So now how do we connect the top right hand side of the grid to the bottom left hand side of the grid? We can't use this square because it will create a 2 by 2. So we have to use this square, which means we have to use this square. We still can't use this square, and you can see we're going to have to build an L tetromino, which might be okay, except for the fact that this tetromino here is an L tetromino. So this does not work, of course. So that means this must be an L tetromino. And now we probably have, now we've got options, look. Yeah, we can make an S tetromino work. That's going to be the only thing that works. It's just beautiful, isn't it? Again, this square can't be in, because if the only options if this square is in are an S, which creates a 2 by 2, or an L, which connects to an L. So this square is not used. You can see all sorts of things now, but what are the options? We can't make this an L, so that's impossible. The only other shape we can draw is an S, which goes like this. Now that disambiguates rather beautifully which way this L tetromino goes, because that's green, and that is the answer to Freddie's puzzle. My goodness me, that is it's just lovely. Let's check. Let's draw it. Check we've got no 2 by 2s. Check everything is joined up. I think it looks good, doesn't it? Check we're not joining the same shapes to each other. And this is why Litz puzzles have been so popular over the years. It's because when you get good ones, they are incredibly fun to solve. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments. There are a lot of Litz puzzles out there, so if you do enjoy it, we can certainly do more of them. And we'll see you later for this incredible Sudoku by Shai and Mark's solve of that puzzle on Cracking the Cryptic.